This week is Parshas Toldos. Pasuk starts off, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham hoilidas Yitzchak. So it's very interesting that we're talking about the Toldos of Yitzchak, and then we go back to Avraham, and then we talk about Yitzchak's children. Now, what's interesting is Stamazai. It's good to know the Torah does not talk about Yitzchak. Very, very little. We know when he was born, we know about the Akedah, and we know what follows after that. And the most of the story of Yitzchak that we know is based off of the story of his children. Now, what we spoke last week in Parshas Chayesara was very much along the lines of the fact that Yitzchak was a Midas Hayira, which was on a level that was a drop too high, or more than a drop too high, for the regular people of this world. So he was he was in a certain sense disconnected, and he wasn't able to have shaykhs to this world as he was in Eila Tamima. Memela, the Torah doesn't even talk about him, in a sense. But obviously there's tremendous amount that we can learn from that fact alone. But the whole concept of the Mid of Yira, the whole concept of giving your life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Zok Rashi, Ve'ela told us Yitzchak, Yaakov and Esav Amur in the Parsha. It's going to discuss Yaakov and Esav in the Parsha. Before we talk about Yaakov and Esav, I want to talk about the next Rashi. Next Rashi is Avram hoilidas Yitzchak. Why are we doing that? We just said, Eila tells us Yitzchak, Ben Avram. Okay, you want to tell me who Yitzchak is? We'll give Yitzchak the Yichur, said he's Ben Avram, in case we're not sure, maybe. Avram hoilidas Yitzchak. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. What's that about? Why do we have to know that? Why do we have to do that? Zok Rashi, La'achar shakara HaKadosh Baruch Hu shmei Avraham, achar kach hoilidas Yitzchak. So Rashi brings a very important yesod, that after HaKadosh Baruch Hu changed his name to Avraham, added the extra hay in there, not extra, but added the hay in there, that's when he's able to have children. Avraham einay moiled, Avraham moiled. So now Avraham has children. So this is the koyach of having children. And it's interesting, because we know the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mis'avel l'tfilosan shel tzadikim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has tremendous desire to hear the tefillos of the tzadikim, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts them in a matzav of tzaris. Ubefrat, not being able to have children. Why is that? So if we have time, we'll talk about it tonight, Mitzvah. But that's the concept b'chlal that we should daven. But why is it dafka in this oifen that they don't have children? So I think we mentioned previously that Reb Tzadok writes on Pekad HaKarim. Reb Tzadok himself didn't have children. Reb Tzadok wrote a whole sefer about the Indian of Akarim, which is the people that physically can't have children. So he explains in the very beginning of the sefer, his basic introduction to the sefer is that Al Pidar HaTeva, the normal way is that they should have children. But because these people are tzaddikim, they're living l'mayl min HaTeva, they're not living within the regular realm of where everyone else lives, so they didn't have children. And it was for a totally different thing, that, he can't have kids because he has a physical issue. It wasn't necessarily, meaning, the reason why they didn't have children isn't because they had a physical issue. By Sarah Grada says that she didn't, that she wasn't able to have children physically, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it like that dafka. There's tremendous hashgacha, stamazai, when children are being born into the world, right? There's tremendous hashgacha. The Gemara has a lashon in a few places. Ein ben David ba'ad sheyichlu kol neshama shebaguf. That Mashiach can't come until all the neshamas are depleted from guf. What's the guf? So Rashi explains that there's a makom of all the neshamas by the Kisei HaKavod, and after every single one of those neshamas comes down to this world, Mashiach could come. So there's a lot of, I want to get back into that later, but there's a lot of talk about that, but there's a very, very specific time when the neshama has to be brought down into this world. It's a very, very specific. There's tremendous hashgacha revolving around every little step of the way. And it's fascinating because in last week's parsha, Shidduchim also work like that, right? They say this by Chassan a lot. Like sometimes, there's a mistake in the ksuba. And then they have to, the Rosh Hashiva and the Rav, they're fighting about, figuring out how to fix the problem in the ksuba. Why? I mean, he's a Talmid Chacham. He's not spaced out. Why did he make a mistake in the ksuba? It's not because the ksuba needed to have a mistake. I mean, obviously that's also hashgacha, but this marriage has to happen at whatever time HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to happen. So it's not going to happen a second before. It's not going to happen a second after. You think it's going to happen because you called us chuppah for 7:30, so the chuppah kedushin is going to happen. Hashem's invitation, it says 7:40. So it's going to be 10 minutes later. And I heard from one of my rebbeim that the pasuk says, Lavan says, "Me Hashem yotza hadavar," that it came from Hashem. So if you would ask anybody, you'd say, "Shkayla, everything's from Hashem." So what's me Hashem yotza hadavar? So why is it that when we celebrate an engagement, we call it a vart? because me Hashem yatsa hadavar. This is the vart. When you talk to the Briskas, right? They don't like all kinds of fluffy things. They want to know the nakuda. What exactly are you saying? What's the nakuda here? What's the point here? What's the vart here exactly? Right? Me Hashem yatsa hadavar. This is the vart. This is exactly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the shidduch happens at the exact time, and the leda, the birth, also happens at the exact time. So that's la'achar shakar HaKadosh Baruch Hu shmoi Avraham. Because only Avraham can have children, Avram won't be able to have children. Another pshat, al yidesha kosav hakosav Yitzchak ben Avram, who's kakloima Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. Because the pasuk said Yitzchak ben Avram, the pasuk therefore had to continue by saying Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. Now, why is that? So Rashi explains. It's based on a medrash. Lefisha hoyu leitzane hadar oimrim me'avi melech nes abra Sarah. This is going to take us back to last week's parsha. That says that the Litzanei Hadar, the people who would mock and ridicule anything chashuv, so they would say that Sarah became pregnant because she was with Avimelech. She lived with Avram for many years. She never had children. And she was never able to have a child from that. So what does Hashem do? Klester Paniv shel Yitzchak doma laAvraham. So he made Yitzchak's face look exactly like Avram. Hakol Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. And everyone was able to testify that Avram was the one that gave birth to Yitzchak. Yitzchak ben Avram. And that's why the pasuk says Yitzchak ben Avram, to tell everybody, no, that it was from a leda, the Yitzchak was born from a leda of Avram and Sarah. Avimelech was not in the equation b'chlal. This testimony, because if you look exactly like your father's, then obviously you're coming from your father, you're not coming from anyone else. So there's a few ha'aris here in the Rashi. Number one, why are they called Litzanei Hadar? Why is this Litzanis? I mean, the mid of Litzanis, Rav Hutton explains in Pachad Yitzchak in Purim, that Amalek is called a Letz, because Amalek is not machshav anything at all. And Amalek is not machshav anything at all. I saw an interesting vart. I hope I can say it over correctly. The Maral's brother wrote a sefer called Igeres Hatiyul. It's an unbelievable sefer. I would say it's almost like Vertlach al pi Seder Aleph Beis, and he has a Chelak HaPshat, Chelak HaRemez, Chelak HaDrosh, and Chelak HaSeder. It's a smallish kind of sefer. It's not Marich. It's a bunch of short Vertlach al pi Seder Aleph Beis. He talks about Eliphaz that we're going to learn in the coming parashas, that Esav told his Eliphaz to go kill Yaakov. But when he met him, he told him like this. When he met Yaakov, he didn't kill Yaakov. So Medrash says, Chazal say that Yaakov gave him all his money, because the oni is chashuv kameis, and you could report back to your father that you killed him. But he says a very interesting thing. He said that if you're going to kill me, Yaakov told Eliphaz alumnus like this. He says, if you're going to kill me, then you are going to have to be mishabed yourself to the shvuah of the bris ben absar. That means that you're going to have to go down to Mitzrayim for 400 years. So he says, oh, okay, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to leave you alone. I don't want to have to be mishabed myself to Mitzrayim for 400 years. So, as I talked there, I was thinking to myself, I said, why was it that Amalek was able to come and start up with the Yidden right after Yitzias Mitzrayim? The whole world saw all the great Nisim. The whole Az Yashir was saying, Yechazem Meirad, Amalek, no, they're not in the spell from the Nisim. Why they're not in the spell from the Nisim? They don't care. Why don't they care? Concern Eifen, they were ready. The secret was leaked to them, so they don't have that hispilus that they should have. But let's say you hear great stuff about the Grand Canyon, how amazing it is, right? And then you go there. It's always going to be bigger, hopefully, as long as you're not going to be disappointed. It's going to be bigger and better than you thought it was, right? It's going to be better than your expectation, right? But that, I think, is along the lines of what's pshat that they were able to just. It was a derech, this whole derech of Litzonis, that, so what, he knew about it. He knew that he was going to be Meshubah in Mitzrayim for 400 years, correct. But he didn't know how exactly HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to take him out of Mitzrayim with all those great nisim. That he didn't know, right? But Aval Pikein, it sounded like he had some, because he knew about it, and he's like, I'm not being gervis, all the nisim that happened afterwards. That's how he's able. But the fact of not being gervis, though, the nisim that happens afterwards, that is good for the mitzvah of Litzanis. There is nothing, it's not possible to be machshav anything. So Dr. Rav Hutner, that's why by Amalek it says, Reishis goyim Amalek v'chrisai adei oived. Why is it that they're doomed for forever? For all eternity, they're doomed. And they're never going to have a tikkun, and they're never going to come back. Why is that? Because they weren't match of anything. They wanted to totally undermine and to destroy everything chashuv. So the Midah Keneged Midah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to completely undermine them and wipe them off the face of the earth l'netzach netzachim without any hope of ever returning. Because if Litzanos means that you're not match of anything, then there's no hope. If there's no hope, then hope means there's still a little spark left alive. When you put out that spark, that's a Kayach Litzanos. You're gone. It's over. It's never coming back. So that's the Midah of Litzanos. But why are we referring to this story as Litzani Hadar? And question number 2 in the Rashi is Ma'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzar klastar panav shel Yitzchak doma laAvraham. He made Yitzchak's face look like Avraham, right? Rashi said by Eliezer also that Eliezer looked like Avraham, and I think Rashi said by Lot also that Lot also looked like Avraham. So you have all these kinds of people that look like Avraham running around when they're definitely not Avram's children, right? Lot was his nephew, Eliezer was his Eved, right? It's like, where does it help? He's a third person to look like Avraham. So you could maybe say al derech hapshat that Avraham was so old when he was born that Yitzchak was a young face, but he still looked like, obviously. And I saw a say for someone else when he was born, he looked like he was 100 years old. It's a foolish question. It's not even a question. It's foolish, right? Obviously, he didn't look like he was 100 years old. You could look like somebody even if you're not the same age, right? But the al pi pshat l'chayra means that the face was the same, even when the age gap was so great. But still, I don't know. This was the question that was really bothering me. And what's the pshat that the third question is v'heidu hakol Avram Halev Yitzchak? Why is it that the Rashi is using twice? Rashi uses a lashon of edus. V'heidu hakol Avram Halev Yitzchak. Shari edus yesh Avram Halev Yitzchak. Twice Rashi uses a lashon. So the famous verse in the Beis Halevi, which we'll go through, that first of all, stamazeh ha'ara. It said in last week's parsha that Abimelech didn't touch Sarah. It wasn't shaykh for Sarah to become this aber from Abimelech because he didn't do anything to her, right? He may have touched her. No more than that. There wasn't any chance for her to have children, right? So, and it says that he was an avi and he knew b'nevuah that nothing happened, right? So it wasn't shaykh. So what's the pshat? So why are we calling them Litzani Hadar? They're Rishay Hadar, right? Aval Hare Adarabba. Avram. So he says like this. He makes a cheshbon. He says Avram was definitely able to have children because he had Yishmael, right? So we have to put the blame on Sarah because she was 90 years old, right? And it's still going to be a nace. It's still going to be a nace even if we say that she had a child from Avimelech at 90, right? But why would Hashem make such a nace from Avimelech, which was through a terrible aver of Eishes, right? So so the Beis Levi explains like this. Rak Amru came b'derech litzanos shero the adkan lahili the Sarah hagam shayis tzadek v'achshav nisabram. He says like this: if you have a guy, right, who makes a living selling butter, right, and he makes a lot of money, he's very very matzliach, and he because he had a lot of money, he was able to build this big massive house. So the sprach in the town becomes he built his house out of butter. Right. So the next generation, they're going to hear, oh, Moshe built his house out of butter. They're going to run to the corner and they're going to try to see if there's the house made out of butter. He said, of course not. A house from butter won't last. Right? But it's just an expression that people say. But what ends up happening over the course of time is that we take the jokes and the litzanas and the stamazeh, the things that people say, stamazeh in the Welterein, without any cheshbon, and we make it like it's something real. Right? Because your kids are going to say, oh, yeah, you want them said that Moshe built a house out of butter. Did he really build it out of butter? Of course not. Right? Everyone knew. Right? But why did they say, where did it come from to begin with that Moshe built his house out of butter? Because he had a butter factory and he had parnasa from that. So based off his parnasa of butter, that's why we call it that his house is out of butter. His house was made out of butter. It doesn't mean that Abimelech and his Abra Sarah. We just proved from the Psukim that it wasn't shaykh such a thing. So why would people say that? So the Gemara tells us in Saita that if somebody accuses his wife of being mizana, and they go to the base of Mikdash, and she drinks the Meisaita, and she's tahar. I mean, she never sinned. So then she gets all kinds of brachas. Right? So what happened here was, she had a Ma'aseh Avimelech. Now she's tahar. So now she gets a schus of Zakti Gemara and Saita that if she didn't have children until now she'll have children. Or if till now she had children that were small, she's going to have children that are healthy. If she had children that look like this, they're going to have much more beautiful looking children, right? So now that it was after this Ma'aseh with Avimelech, so they're going to say, Avimelech and Sabra Sarah. It's not because that there was a Ma'aseh of Avimelech and Sarah. There's no shaykhs. There's no Hava meaning to say that Avimelech didn't to him. We said the Psukim said that already. So what's Pshat? Because through Avimelech, Sarah was able to have a child. Through the money that this guy had, he built a house out of butter. No, he didn't build a house out of butter, right? That's what he says. It's interesting, the lesson that he uses. And he says, over time we're going to forget about it, right? And the Divrei Litzanis are going to be remembered. And then people are going to say, it was because of Avimelech and Sabra Sarah, right? Because she was like a Saita, right? And then they're going to say, wait a minute, she was a Saita? Maybe she really, as the story continues, people are going to get more and more caught up in this. So eventually it can end up being a big zilzal and it'll end up being mighty laws on Sarah and on Yitzchak. So that's why we refer to them as Litzani Hadar. They're not Rishay Hadar, because they don't mean, no one's saying anything nasty about them. Just that's how it's Nisgalgal. That's how it's Nisgalgal throughout. Okay. Now, on the other point that we said that Eliezer looked like Avraham and that Lot looked like Avraham. So then what was the harvacha? What did we gain by saying that Yitzchak now looks like Avraham? So now, when you have Eliezer, Yitzchak, and Lot sitting by Avram, Yitzchak, and Eliezer sitting by Shabbos Suda, you have three, it looks like triplets. They all look exactly the same. Yeah, so it's a mud nesach. But I want to share a Gemara with you and a little bit of understanding of the Gemara after. The Gemara Sanhedrin on the Lamed Ches. First of all, somebody be kedai to see the mission over there that that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in such a fascinating way. How every single person looks differently than somebody else. Kishem shem parts of fame, Shavais kachin they say, and Shavais they don't think alike and they don't look alike. So what's Gairim what? It sounds like that one's Gairim the other, right? If I think differently, then I look differently, or I look differently, maybe I think differently. But the concept is that a face is called a panim. Panim is milashon pnim, what's inside. And that's how Chazal and others understand that that's what it means that he looked like Avram. Doesn't mean necessarily that his physical appearance was like Avram. His inner mitzias was exactly like Avram. So you'll ask, Ava and Yira. Ava and Yira always go together. It's Nishkin Kasha. We could talk about that. But let's read the Gemara, Lamed Ches Amud Aleph in Sanhedrin. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa. Lahagid Gdulasai Shamelech Malchem Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To speak out the greatness of the King of all kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She'adam Tevea Kama Matbeis, a person mints many coins, B'chaisam Echad, with one stamp, V'kulan Diamond Zelazah. And they all look exactly the same. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tevea Kol Adam B'chaisam Shel Adam Arishan. All people have two eyes, have a nose with two nostrils, have one mouth, have two ears, 5 fingers on each hand, they have a chest somewhere in the middle, but yet nobody looks the same. So how could he pull that off? That's a very godless. And not one of them looks like his friend. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, you turn over the form of the stamp, and they'll all stand like they're dressed. In parts of why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create like that? I don't know. Dr. Seuss has a book, 24 Daves. He has 24 kids and named all of them Dave. What's the difference? Why can't, let's say all the Chinese people look the same, right? I don't know, why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu just didn't make that every single person should look the same? If you talk to the big bikim in animals, they'll tell you that every zebra, the stripes on the zebra are as different as your fingerprints. The science will tell you such a thing, right? Come on, all zebras look the same. Don't tell me that it could be, but I don't see it. You don't see it. It's like, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to make everything so different? In parts of like the Gemara, a person shouldn't see a nice house, or he'll see a nice woman, he'll say it's mine, right? Because, I'll say it's mine, then you'll come in, you'll say it's yours. See, we'll go to the dine, and the dine won't even know what we're talking about, right? Because I look like you look like me. There's no way to know the difference. Vein adam machisha, hoil vein heker b'neihem, right? I go to the store, buy something on credit, I'll never have to pay because, it'll be a free-for-all because there won't be any responsibility in any way. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, "Vayimna me'Risham Aram." Hashem will withhold His light from the Risham. Uzraya Rima Tishaver. Uzraya Rama Tishaver. Hashem will break the gaiva of the Risham. Tanya, and the Brisa continues. Meir would say, the three things, the three distinct features in each person that make him completely different than everyone else. B'mara, the way he looks. B'koil, his voice. B'mara, the way he looks. U'b'das, and the way he thinks. B'koil b'mara mishum erva, right? Because like the Gemara Gittin says, right? How do you know it's your wife if it's pitch dark, right? The Gemara asks, how could a blind person be motor to marry a woman? Maybe he's going to marry. He doesn't know the difference. He never saw her, so how could he get married, right? And the reason why a person has different das is because of the gazlanim. Zok Rashi, mishum vayimna merisham oiram, klastar panav, meaning that the or that we're referring to means the distinct features of a person's face. Because their face shouldn't look exactly like their friends. You'll come in, you'll say that you bought something. Then the other guy's going to come in and say he bought the same thing. You're going to end up beating each other up. But I don't know, how am I supposed to know the difference? They look exactly the same. Mishum erva, the wives are going to get confused with the husbands. So by day you'll be able to see them, and at night they'll sound different, right? So the Gemara over there in Gittin says that betvius ain't the color. They sound different, and we know that if a person is blind, his other five senses, his other four senses really work much stronger. So he'll have a much more of a tvius ayin on the sounds that he hears. He'll be able to pick it up better. If everybody would think alike, imagine everybody thought the exact same thing, right? From when they woke up in the morning till they go to sleep at night, right? No one's going to be able to have anything private, and no one's going to be able to have, if I do an Aveira, you're going to know about it. Because we all think exactly the same. We'd probably end up all doing the same Aveiros, we'd probably all end up doing the same mitzvahs. And like the din v'cheshbon on things is going to be really insane, right? Because then, one guy's Machal Shabbos, everyone's going to be Machal Shabbos, like it's going to be crazy, right? One guy learns about Smad Rabbah for 18 hours, everyone else is going to be Meshuvah to that Smad for 18 hours. Can't work like that. The world's got to move, right? So obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this Greis Hazach that ain't parts of Fein Daim Zelazah. It's a fascinating thing. So when I first asked this question, I was thinking about it, in Rashi, like, what does it help if you have Eliezer that's Daimet Avram, you have Loit that's Daimet Avram, you have Yitzchak that's Daimet Avram. But now let's think about this for a second. Let's break it down. Who is Eliezer? He's Eved Avram. He's Dailo Mashkim Mitesh Rabbi Lacherim. He had a very different role in the world than Yitzchak. His Pnimius, his Pnim, his Panim, his Kalaster Panav. First of all, Rashi doesn't use that lashon by Eliezer. Each time Rashi uses different lashon, so obviously it means something else. Right, but let's just, without getting involved in the technicalities of the Lashonis, let's just break it down simple. Eliezer's role was to be Deilo Mashkim Mitesh Rabbi Lacherim, HaMeishal L'Asher Loi. Right? That was the role of Eliezer. Loit's role was to tag along. Right? And when he was busy in Siddim and whatever the story was, so that was his geschäft, whatever the problem was with Loit were. Now, Yitzchak, see, it doesn't mean that Loit, Yitzchak, and Eliezer were all the same personality. We're all the same avodah. We're all the same madrega zichna, right? Kishem shem parts of fein daim zelazeh and they say in Shabbos, right? So you'll say I parts of fein was daim zelazeh, but it's not, right? They all took from Avram whatever they were able to. Avram was mashpia on them tremendously, but at the same time, they all had something in common because they were all being mushba from Avraham. And my first thoughts to answer the question were that it was different time zones. You know, the story of Lot in Parshat Yaira, the story of Eliezer Be'ikaz in Parshat Sarah, the story of Yitzchak is in Parshat Sarah, but it's mostly what we're dealing with now is in Parshat Toldos with the children of Yitzchak, with Yaakov and Esau. Right? So it's not going to all be the same thing. But I just want to mention that the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Ishchai, the Gemara over here, he has a good kasha. Because the Gemara says like this, Shalai Yira Adam Dira Noah Ve'isha Noah, and he's going to say, how could you tell me that all the Ishas are going to look the same way also? And they're all going to be thinking the same way also. So why does it help that your Isha looks different than my Isha? That won't be, because all the Ishas are going to look the same way. So it's going to make the problems even worse. You know, it's one thing if all the women look differently and all the men look the same, right? Or it's one thing if all the Ishas look the same and all the men look different. At least one team is going to be able to pick out the differences from the other team. But if everyone's going to be looking exactly the same, no man is going to be able to differentiate between any woman, and no woman is going to be able to differentiate between any man, then it's going to be crazy, right? So I say, Ben Yehoyada, Makshim, Kevin the Hatsurais, Shavim, Ve'en Hefresh Ben Zelazeh, since they all look the same, there's no difference. Imkain, Lo Yesh Isha Noah, Isha Einah. So how can you say that there's an Isha Noah? They all look the same. Noah B'maisim. I usually don't know that a woman has good midas until you spend some time with her, right? Or you can look at Eliezer, give her some tests. There'd be some kind of difference. So it's only when you get to know a person quite well, then you'll know that there still will be a mashra of difference. It's like if you would have edus. I'm telling you, think about it, it's going to make you're going to go nuts about it, right? You need Edom to say that you're being Mekadosh this Isha, right? That's why we have Edom by the Chuppah, right? L'chenim kiddush Isha b'fnei Edom, v'ra acheres na mimena, right? The guy's walking in the street, sees a woman that he likes, is better than the wife, the one that he's married to. Yarmezu Hisha Kidash, he says, I was married. That's my wife, right? She'ena Edom argishim b'hefer shadak, she'esh ben zu shekish ben acheres. Edom not going to know the difference. The rabbis won't know the difference. And the Edom will say, yeah, that's the one that we saw under the chuppah. It's going to be horrible. Maybe she's wiser. Says maybe the facial features will look the same, but there'll be different heights, different widths, different, saying technically everybody has the same features, right? Some people have big bushy eyebrows, some people have small eyebrows, right? But there would still be, this. So there's interesting different zachen over here to be able to know the differences. Once on this topic, I figured I'll look into it a little bit, and it's mamish. It just keeps going. This thing, it's really great. There's a Ramban later on in the parasha by Kol Yaakov Ayidayim Yidei Esav. The Ramban says, if they sounded different, right? First of all, they were twins, right? So Pashtus, they sounded pretty similar, right? But Yitzchak started getting suspicious because he says, one second, Esav doesn't mention Shem Shemaim. Yaakov is dropping, so he comes in and he starts talking like Esav, hey, Dad, what's up? All the things. What's doing? He says, what's doing? Baruch Hashem. That's not Esav talk. Esav don't talk like that. Esav talks, of course, he talks like a street guy. He doesn't talk like a yeshiva man, right? So Dr. Ramban, maybe they had similar voices. Yaakov always spoke softly. Where he changed his voice, he imitated Esav. So he should be able to pull it off to confuse Yitzchak to really think. And the Ramban continues, says, because there are people that know how to imitate others well to be able to fool others into thinking that's who it is. It's funny because when I was a kid, people called my house, I'd answer the phone, people think it was my father. I don't know if you think we sound the same, but, many people do, right? Mr. Nassim says the same thing as our Gemara. And interesting, the Tveres Yisrael in Pirkei Avos says that there's something called a Yiddish face, a Yiddish look, and brings a pasuk. Kol re'ayim yakiru kihem zera berach Hashem. They all look the same. Meaning all the Yidden have a very Yiddish look. Sometimes you run into a guy and like, I don't know if that's in the Kuda, but sometimes you have, it's a certain surah, a certain, it's very easy to pick up from studying a person's face. I don't know Chachmas parts of there is such a thing, but you could tell a lot about a person by looking at it, by watching his face. It was very interesting. I sometimes, I was talking to somebody for a long time, somebody, a friend of mine, and he was saying something, I don't remember what he was talking about, and then I have to do something must have happened to him somewhere during his life, that something went very wrong, and he was very tzibrochen about it. And I did a little research, and I found that there was a terrible tragedy that happened, that happened to him, that happened to his family. And it was so weird because I had no clue. Because if you'd meet him, you wouldn't know anything. But I saw something, and I hopped that there's something off. There's something somewhere, somehow, something just didn't, and you could tell that by a person's face. I'm not trying to spook you out, I'm just telling you it is. Okay. It says weiter, it says by Yaakov, it says that ki ben zekunim hu loy by Yosef, right? Ben zekunim also means the zivi kunin shel loy doma, that Yosef looked like Yaakov, and it says that by Eliezer also. I'm just going to read a few lines over here, and he says that it's Yitzchak that Eliezer was the Eved, he was from Nimrod, so he was darker than Abraham. So how could he look the same? But it means that he showed him the pnimius, because panim is milashon pnim. And when he says that he was diamond, it means his pnimius was there. And the Maharsha writes in Megillah, on Daf Chav Ches, shebetzelem demusa odam yesh demus ruchnis hamara ma'aseh l'tevel hara. That a person could tell, a person who has a good sense of ruchnis is able to tell if a person's where he's holding a ruchnis. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Have a makabel kol odam b'sever panim yafis." What's b'sever mean? Why not just panim yafis, nice faces? What's b'sever panim yafis? Zok the meiri, l'pa'amim en lecha matzav ruach. Sometimes a person is not doing good, and when a person comes to try to be mechazik him, he's not in the mood. But even though you're not in the mood, right? When he's going to come to you, you'll smile, you'll make believe, right? Like the Gemara Ksubis says at the end of Ksubis that Uleven Shinai Mecholov says in the Brachas that Yaakov benched Yehuda. It says Uleven Shinai Mecholov. So the Gemara Ksubis says it literally means that there'll be so much milk that their teeth will be white from the milk. But the Gemara Darshan says to mean that it's much better to show your teeth, to show the whiteness of your teeth in a smile to somebody else than to give him milk. So what's pshat milk? So I think the Maharsha says because milk is the spitz nourishment, it's the spitz nutrition, because that's what the mother feeds a child. So it's even better than the mother. When you smile to somebody, you never know what the other person is going through. So it could do even more than what a mother's milk could do. I mean, that's what the Maharsha learns. So it's taka grace zayich, fine, that was that. And yeah, so that's that. Fine. Let's go a little bit weiter. The Balaturim says Hoylid is b'gematria Doma. Hoylid is the same gematria as Doma. Shahayu zivi kunin shel Yitzchak Doma lavraham. So we just explained that in Rashi. It's interesting. This Machmaisha talks very, very similar to the question that the Beis Halevi was addressing. And he says, why is it that there was a chshad when Yitzchak was born? Yitzchak should be born b'kedusha. When you think about it like this, the Maral gives a mashal in a place. He says that if you're building a building or you're planting a tree, the seeds that you're putting in have to be in the right place. The foundation of the building has to be good. If not, the whole building is going to come down, or your tree is going to grow crooked. If you want your tree to grow straight, it has to be planted properly. So in the Shurashim of Klal Yisrael, when Klal Yisrael is growing, Klal Yisrael is being created, the Shurashim have to be put in properly. If not, the whole thing is going to grow crooked, and it's going to be horrible. It's going to be a disaster. So why is it that there's like a chshad of an avera when Yitzchak is being born? So he brings from the Ramami Pan writes in his Chuvas that they didn't want to give Shmuel smicha. I mean, B'Sifra Shaldam Rishon, very fascinating Gemara about Metzia, the B'Sifra Shaldam Rishon, they didn't want to give Shmuel smicha. Why not? It's not a Gemara, but it's Brun Halachas Gedailus. There are a Muslim to it in different Rishonim in different places. Basically, what happened was, Shmuel's father was away on business. Shmuel the Amira, his father was away on business, and someone tried to be ma'anis his mother, and he knew Shemus. He knew, Shemus of Hashem, and he flew back with Kvitzas Haderech to be with his wife, and from that, Shmuel was born. And then he went back to his business right afterwards. So, he was born through Echshad. Meaning because they were saying that, how could it be that she was able to have a child if the husband was away for so long? Doesn't make sense, doesn't add up. So the Gemara, the Gemara says that they didn't want to put him into the Sefer of Adam Rishon because into that Madrega, because he was born with a Chshad. Even though he was kosher, he was born by kashrus. V'yadua, the betzadikim kemurim Hashem yisparach meslavish be'em manhigim es ha'olam midoseh be'bezin shamayla. The function of bezin shamayla is based on the tzadikim that are in the world now, and the midah of Yitzchak is tremendous midah sayira, which means the midah sadin. So technically speaking, in Shemayim, the din would have to be with the tremendous midah sadin. But that's why it's Eila tells Yitzchak ben Avram that the hanhaga of the midas in Bezin Shamayla should be done al pi Avram, which is the bechina of Chesed, right? Which is much, softer, so to speak, than din. V'chai ad sheyakov nasa ben Yud Gimel Shana sheyotze mechlal kotam v'rei lidin u'ber b'yomeis Avram, and he lived until Yaakov was 13 years old, and then he died that day, because then Yaakov was able to be nidin al pidin, right? It's interesting. I'm going to shtickle ha'or on this is because we know that Rashi mentioned already in a few places that they're not manish in Bezin Shamayla until 20, right? Okay, there's a lot more to talk over here, but Agapana we got through a little bit now, and that's the story with the first pasuk Agapana, the first Rashi of Avram Holid es Yitzchak.